The sun hung like a copper coin over Thunder Creek, casting long shadows across the dusty main street. Sheriff Jake Iron Hand Morrison adjusted his worn leather holster and spat into the dirt, his weathered face squinting against the desert glare. Word had come down from the telegraph office that morning. The notorious Blackwater Gang was riding hard toward town, and they had a score to settle. "Reckon they'll be here for sundown," muttered old Pete from his perch on the general store porch, his gnarled fingers working a piece of whittling wood. "That sidewinder Caleb Blackwater's been itching for a fight ever since you sent his brother to the hoosgow." Jake nodded grimly. 3 months back, he'd collared Tommy Blackwater for rustling cattle from the Henderson Ranch. The varmint was now cooling his heels in the territorial prison, but his older brother Caleb had been raising hell across 3 counties ever since, promising to come back and even the score. The sheriff checked his Colt 45 one more time, the familiar weight of the iron comforting in his calloused palm. He'd been wearing a badge for nigh on 15 years, and he'd learned that some men were just born with snake's blood running through their veins. Caleb Blackwater was one such hombre. As the afternoon wore on, the good folks of Thunder Creek began boarding up their windows and shooing their young'uns indoors. The saloon went quiet as a church on Monday, and even the mangy dogs seemed to sense trouble brewing in the wind. Around 4 o'clock, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon like a brown thunderhead. Jake stepped out into the middle of Main Street, his spurs jingling softly with each measured step. His deputy, a green kid named Billy Cooper, emerged from the jailhouse with a scattergun clutched in his trembling hands. "Easy there, son," Jake said without turning around. "Keep your powder dry and your wits about you. These ain't church-going men we're fixing to face." The riders came fast and hard, 6 of them in all, their horses' hooves thundering against the packed earth like war drums. Caleb Blackwater rode point, a tall drink of water with a black mustache and cold eyes that could freeze hell over. His boys spread out behind him, a collection of hard cases, and saddle tramps who'd sold their souls for $30 and found money. They reined up about 50 yards out, their mounts snorting and pawing the ground. Caleb dismounted slow and deliberate, his hand resting casual-like on his gun butt. He was dressed in black from his hat to his boots, like he was going to his own funeral, which Jake reckoned might just be the case. "Well, well," Caleb called out, his voice carrying clear across the dusty space between them. "If it ain't the high and mighty Sheriff Morrison, heard tell you been spreading lies about my family." "No lies, Blackwater," Jake replied, his voice steady as bedrock. "Your brother was caught red-handed with Henderson's beef. Judge gave him 5 years, and that's the gospel truth." Caleb's laugh was about as warm as a rattler's kiss. "Maybe so, but Tommy was just a boy who made a mistake. Didn't deserve to be thrown in with murderers and claim jumpers. Should have thought of that before he started running other folks' cattle," Jake said. "Way I see it, he got off light." The tension stretched between them like a bowstring pulled taut. Behind the boarded windows, Jake could sense the townspeople holding their breath. Old Pete had disappeared from his porch, and even the tumbleweeds seemed to have stopped rolling. "I'll tell you what, Sheriff," Caleb said, taking a step forward. "I come here to make you a deal. You wire the territorial governor. Tell him my brother was framed, get him released, and me and my boys will ride out peaceful-like. Nobody has to get ventilated today." Jake shook his head. "Can't do that, Blackwater. Your brother got a fair trial, and justice was served. That's the end of it." "Then I reckon we got ourselves a genuine disagreement," Caleb said, his hand moving closer to his iron. "And out here we settle disagreements the old-fashioned way." "That's your choice to make," Jake replied. "But I'm sworn to uphold the law in this town, and that's exactly what I aim to do, come hell or high water." The street fell silent except for the whisper of wind through the eaves and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Both men stood motionless, sizing each other up like prize-fighters before the bell. Then Caleb made his play. His hand flashed down toward his gun, but Jake was already moving. Iron Hand Morrison didn't get his nickname by being slow on the draw. His Colt cleared leather smooth as silk, and the crack of gunfire split the afternoon air like thunder. Caleb's shot went wide, kicking up dust 3 feet to Jake's left. The sheriff's bullet found its mark, catching the outlaw center mass and spinning him around like a child's top. Caleb hit the dirt hard and didn't get up. The rest of the Blackwater Gang seemed stunned for a heartbeat, then all hell broke loose. Guns blazed from both sides as Jake dove for cover behind a water trough. Deputy Billy let loose with both barrels of his scattergun, and 2 more outlaws bit the dust in a spray of buckshot. The gunfight lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, 4 of the gang lay still in the street, and the other 2 were hightailing it out of town like their britches were on fire. Jake holstered his smoking iron and walked over to where Caleb Blackwater lay gasping in the dust. The outlaw's face was pale as flour, but his eyes still held that mean streak. "Reckon. You got me fair and square, Sheriff," Caleb wheezed. "But this ain't over. Got more brothers and cousins." "Maybe so," Jake said quietly. "But they ain't here today, and you ain't gonna be around to see tomorrow." Caleb tried to say something else, but the words died on his lips as he crossed over to whatever judgment awaited him on the other side. As the sun began to set over Thunder Creek, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, Sheriff Jake Morrison stood in the middle of his town, alive and victorious. The good people began emerging from their hiding places, and old Pete reappeared on his porch with a bottle of rot-gut whiskey. "Drinks are on the house tonight, Sheriff," called out Sam, the bartender. "Hell of a thing going up against 6 men like that." Jake just touched the brim of his hat and headed toward the jailhouse. Tomorrow would bring new troubles, new outlaws, and new challenges. But tonight, Thunder Creek was safe, and that was enough for Iron Hand Morrison. As he walked, his spurs jingling softly in the gathering dusk, Jake reflected on the eternal truth of the frontier. Out here in the wild country, a man's word and his gun were all that stood between civilization and chaos. And as long as there were sheriffs willing to stand in that gap, the West would remain a place where decent folks could make a life for themselves and their families. The last light faded from the western sky, and another day ended in Thunder Creek, a town that had seen its share of trouble but had always found men brave enough to face it down when the chips were on the table and the stakes couldn't be higher.